Hi everyone, this is Constellations here, and I'm here to talk about Alhaitham Math Guide 1. So as per the usual Math Guide 1s, we will do talents, passive, the signature weapon, constellations, and we'll do Constellations Conclusion, followed by an overall kit summary, some notes and assumptions, energy generation, his comms, etc. Okay, and we'll go on to the TLDR. But for the math guide one, I would definitely recommend you to look at the kit summary as well as the constellation conclusion before going to the TLDR, because most of the details will be in there. Alright? And as per how I always end a video, we will talk about what's coming next. So Alhaitham, very quickly, let's just look at his stats. Okay. 13k HP for a melee character, I think it's okay, especially since it's not HP scaling. Attack is actually pretty decent. Now I know this is not high attack like those 340 plus attack kind of character, but this is okay because you gotta remember that you gotta take note that he has EM scaling in his talent multipliers. So having this amount of attack is actually pretty good. I mean, compare that to the first person who had EM talent multipliers, Nahida. Her attack is a lot lower. Alright. Now, unfortunately, Alhaitham doesn't have any crits essential stat. Instead, he has the Dendro damage. But this may work out in terms of maybe using something like a EM or attack goblet. But I'll do the math for that in Math Guide 2 to compare how close it is in terms of the difference. Yeah. Okay. Signature weapon is called Light of Folia Sanction. Base attack is low, 542. Crit damage is 88.2. The weapon refinement effect, I'll talk more about it in the signature weapon section itself. So let's go on to talk about the talents, okay? So far what we have is more like an intro and just a quick look at his stats. Now let's look at his talents. Normal attack talent, modifiers are okay, the multipliers are okay for sword DPS. In fact, as I'll say, it's higher than average. Now Alhaitham will be getting Dendro Infusion for his normal attacks. So it's not too bad leveling his normal attack, but his normal attacks mainly serve as driver for his projections. So I'll say the talent priority is not high, especially since now the weekly boss Scara, weekly boss material is so in demand, right? With all the new characters requiring it. So technically speaking, it's perfectly fine to keep this at level 6. Temporarily anyway. But more importantly, the reason why I say it's not that it's important to level this talent is also because there's no EM scaling on this normal attack, unlike his E and Q, unless you use his signature weapon. And even if you use the signature weapon, the talent level actually doesn't matter. Because it's a flat bonus added onto it, yeah? I mean, it's nice to increase it, but it's not high priority, okay? But nevertheless, I put the level 9 figures here. So that's the normal attack. Now, the most interesting part of his kit would be his E and his Q, and I'll explain to you guys how it works because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. People don't understand that you can't get a full Q along with full on-field DPS, and somehow they are complaining about it. But I'll address that later. So first off, his E, very straightforward. His E is kind of like Kechin's E, where you either press or you hold to aim. Aim where he will do a rush attack towards. Now this rush attack multiplier is actually pretty high. Yeah, it's actually very high. If you look at it, it's 332.2% attack plus 666.4% EM. If you know how attack and EM typically works, right? Like a fully maxed out EM character, typically you hit about 800 to 1k EM. As for attack, typical attack scaling DPS character, you would hit 5k. Oh, sorry, what I forgot. 2k if you're using 5-star weapon. That's where the 5 comes from. Okay, so 2k if you're using a 5-star weapon. If you're using a 4-star weapon, then typically it's like 1.6 to 1.8k. So generally speaking, EM is always half of attack. Okay, that's what I'm trying to tell you guys. EM is always half of attack, and with the multiplier here being exactly the double of the attack, essentially his scaling is even 50-50, at least on the talent multipliers. There are other stuff that EM gets to benefit from, which is why he's a character where EM is actually more important than attack. But for his multipliers, it's still pretty high because if you remember I mentioned about it being 50-50, right? If I add it together, right, This is like E that does 600 plus almost 700% attack, if you think of it that way. So it's pretty substantial. Okay, but there's a reason for that, because his E cooldown is very, very long. It's as long as a Q. It's 18 seconds, so I guess it's balanced off in that aspect, while still providing a good surge damage. Now, more importantly about his E is the 3 rows you see here, the 1 mirror, 2 mirror, 3 mirror projection figures. When you have 1 mirror, you do one attack that does this. When you have 2 mirrors, it does 2 of this. When you have 3 mirrors, it does 3 of this. Okay, so if you look at the total attack, it is increasing. Okay, I mean, it's very straightforward, right? 163.2, and then when you have 2 mirrors, this is like 200. No, 217.6 if I want to be 100% accurate. And obviously for the 90.7, it's multiplied by 3, you get 270 plus. Okay, so what his E does is that it summons 1 Chisel Light Mirror, 2 if none exists at the point of using your E. So let's say if there's no mirror around, just use your E and you will basically spawn 2 mirrors. And what Chisel Light Mirror does is this four features here per se. Alhaitham's normal attack CAPA gets Dendro infusion that cannot be overridden. When you have your mirrors, when the mirrors are present, he gets Dendro infusion that cannot be overridden. So what this means is that, say if you stay in Bennett's queue, if you're C6 Bennett, you'll still be doing Dendro. I mean, I'm using that as an example, okay? Now, when NACAPA hits opponents, the mirrors will unleash a projection attack that deals AoE Dendro damage every 1.6 seconds, which is the projection attack interval here. Now this is very important. All right, it does a projection attack that's AoE is every 1.6 seconds, and we have 3 mirrors is 3 hits. 3 hits will make a difference in terms of reaction if you know how ICD works, right? The hit rule. And I'll talk more about that later in the ICD section. Now you can have 3 mirrors max on field, and Chisel Light mirrors will disappear one after the other every 4 seconds. This is very important to take note of, okay? It disappears one after the other every 4 seconds. And it will all disappear when Alhaitham leaves the field. So basically, the more mirrors you have, the less damage each projection attack does, but overall projection attack damage is still higher with more mirrors. And given the skilling that you see here, I'll say that it's quite obvious that this projection attack is meant to be his main source of damage when you are playing him as an on-field DPS role. He takes at least 12 seconds on field, more with Q and Constellations. Maybe more. There's a way to I'll find a way to do it more accurately when it comes to the math guide too, in terms of the actual amount of time he spends on field. Oh, and he has no increased resistance to interaction while the mirrors are up. But since you're just using his normal attacks to drive, the most important thing is just to make sure that your projection attacks are always triggered every 1.6 seconds. You keep it on a 100% uptime per se. I'll say it's more forgiving than say Yelan's Q that every second, because you actually can afford to dodge, do a dodge and do an NA immediately, and you still trigger your projection attack. Okay, this is very important. You can actually afford to dodge on Alhaitham because of the fact that it's 1.6 seconds and not 1 second on the projection attack interval. So there's something good coming out of this, as in the interval taking longer. Now, before I talk about how his E works with his entire kit, we'll talk about his Q and other parts of his kit first. So the elemental burst is kind of like Keqing's in terms of the animation, where basically he does a lot of multiple instances of attack. But the difference with Keqing is that his multipliers are actually pretty damn high on his Q. Again, remember what I said, right? You think of it as a 50-50. So this is basically, the Q is basically like a 400% attack Q. 4 instances of it. So it's huge. And if you get 10 instances, it's even better, right? But there are a lot more nuances involved with his Q. A lot more. And let me share it with you guys. Okay, so first off, 2 seconds after this ability is unleashed, if 0, 1, 2, or 3 mirrors were consumed, Alhaitham will generate 3, 2, 1, or 0 new mirrors in turn. Which means if you consume the mirrors fully, you generate 0 mirrors. If you don't consume any mirror, you generate 3 mirrors. And the in-between stuff, but I don't really recommend doing the in-between stuff. Now, this is an interesting burst because you actually have the option of using Alhaitham as a quick sword rather than on-field DPS. Remember what I said about the mirror disappearing every 4 seconds? You can think of it like Bleach. What's that guy's name? Hizugaya. Okay, Hizugaya's Bankai, where there's the ice petal thingy. Over time, the ice petal disappears, and once everything disappears, then you no longer have your projection attacks. And for the case of Hizugaya, yeah, his Bankai is gone. So, why did I mention this? It's because if you're trying to use all 3 mirrors, to consume all 3 mirrors, you basically can only choose to be on field for 4 seconds. Sorry, in fact, it's less than 4 seconds. Okay, wait. It is 4 seconds, but it's not a full 4 seconds of normal attacks. That's what I'm trying to say. Because you're going to be doing your E, your CA, and then a couple of normal attacks, and that's it. And you have to cast your Q to make sure you still have your 3 mirrors. I don't even recommend doing the normal attacks, to be honest, if you're going to play the quick sword role. Now, if you don't want to play quick sword role, you want to play on-field DPS, then you can actually use his Q to set up a longer on-field DPS period where you always have 3 mirrors. Why? Because your Q is going to give you 3 mirrors. 4 seconds later, it's going to drop to 2 mirrors. But you can use your E to spawn another mirror and make it 3 mirrors again for another 4 seconds. Then you use your CA coupled with your A1 passive effect and extend it by another 4 seconds. I know I'm jumping ahead here, but yeah, I have to explain this here. Okay, now for his constellation, it will be 8 seconds of 3 mirrors because you kind of have to do a fourth for the const effect. So you shorten your duration by 1 interval, basically 1 period. So like I said, the burst is also the reason why you see people describe him as a Dendro Curtin slash Ayaka, right? Because of how it eludes the Dendro infusion and then the hold to aim his E as well. While Dendro Ayaka, because his Q multipliers are closer to Ayaka's rather than Curtin's. But of course, the number of hits are different too. Curtin is like 10, Ayaka is like 21. But obviously, hitting all 21 instances of Ayaka is not 100% thing. Okay, very very seldom do you get 100% on it anyway. Now, look at all the multipliers. They actually look higher than Ayaka's, but we will know when we see the math. Now, one very important thing I want to point out or to highlight, right, is that the mirror generation from his Q has a 2-second wait time. Okay, 2 seconds. So if you don't have C2 or C6, basically you just redodge and reposition while you're waiting. Unfortunately, because these 2 seconds basically happen only starts after your burst animation. Because your burst animation is him setting up to unleash. And when he unleashes his Q, then you get the 2 seconds counter starting. But it's not so bad because basically think of it this way. You're not completely it's not like you're not doing damage. Okay? In that 2 seconds while you're waiting for that 2 seconds, your basic attack instances from your Q are still dealing damage. Okay? Alright. Now, with C2 or C6 though, it may make sense to use either E or C to trigger one mirror first, so that the 3 mirrors from Q immediately gives you the C2 or C6 effect. But more likely than not, only C6 will be worth shortening your duration, your on-field DPS duration, because the 4th step from C2 effect is just 80 EM versus the 10 CI and 70 CD from C6 effect, unless you're looking for higher DPS upfront. But I'll talk more about the C2 and C6 effect later in the Constellation section. Okay? So let's talk about the passive. Now, you have heard me mention the A1 passive, right? So the A1 passive is very, very straightforward. It's nice, simple, straightforward. You basically, when you use your charge attack or plunging attack, you generate 1 Chisel Light Mirror. And this effect can only be triggered once every 12 seconds. It's a long duration. Also the reason why I say, if you want to use 3 mirror Q, you have to sacrifice your on-field time. There's no two way about it. Because you'll be using your Q sorry, you'll be using your E to generate 2 mirrors first, followed by a charge attack, and that gives you your 3 mirrors, right? Then you use your Q. And then, considering that his E has 18-second cooldown, his Q has 18-second cooldown, this effect has 12-second cooldown, yeah, your Alhaitham is going to have a very long downtime if you choose to play him as a Quick Sword. It's doable, don't get me wrong, it's doable, especially in a specific scenario where a surge in damage is good enough. Go for it. But just bear in mind the cons that come with it. Now, if you are using this charge attack for extension after using Q to generate mirrors, which is the on-field DPS setup, ultimately getting 3 mirrors for 12 seconds, then it's a good way to control when you're extending, right? Just do the charge attack at the 4th second mark. By the time you charge and hit, it should be just nice. But you can also play safe and do it on the 5th second mark. But personally, when I do get the Alhaitham to test with, I'll definitely test this, right? Whether it's more optimal to do it on 4th second mark or 5th second mark, or just wait until you see the mirror disappear, then you do the charge attack. That's the play safe option. Okay. Now, each point of the next passive, each point of Alhaitham's EM will increase the damage dealt by projection attacks and Q by 0.12%. Maximum damage increase is from 100%. So basically, this is kind of EM scaling similar to Yae's or Tighnari's. It improves both his projection attacks from the mirrors and his Q damage, which are his 2 biggest sources of damage on the 2 different rules. E-rush damage doesn't get a buff, but I guess the multipliers are high enough anyway. Okay, there's no such thing high enough, right? It's already pretty high, so I guess that's a trade-off. Now, one thing to know is that you only need 834 EM to get a max 100% bonus, so that's nice. But given how high his EM skilling is, right, there's no harm getting more EM. But only if you don't sacrifice your crit stats. So I'll talk more about Math Guide 2. In Math Guide 2, how to optimize the EM. But if you have seen my previous videos for the Sumeru meta especially, you know it's always going to be about team EM buffs. Those are very, very important. Okay? And TM buffs doesn't necessarily have to be pay to win. Nahida alone is a very, very good option. So Alhaitham crafts gives you 10% chance to receive double the product on weapon essential material. Personally, I always prefer 25% because 10% always has an actual less than 10% for me. But that's me. Okay? Let's talk about the signature weapon. I already talked about stats, right? It's a low attack, 88.2% crit damage weapon. It does have a little bit of crit rate in the weapon refinement effect. It's 4%, this is R1, so crit rate increased by 4% when normal attacks deal with elemental damage, hence the Dendro infusion. The Folia Ascension effect will be obtained, increasing damage dealt by normal attacks and elemental skills by 120% of EM. So technically speaking, if you have this weapon, you should do a normal attack before you do your E. But it's a bit of a conundrum, right? Because without your E, you wouldn't be able to do the elemental damage with normal attack. Okay. So unfortunately, this is really meant for the projection attacks, not really for his E, unless you want to do CA first. Okay. Now this effect will disappear after 28 damage instances or 12 seconds. It used to be 16, I think, but the recent change made it 28. So that's really good. Because if you consider the amount of normal attacks he's going to be spamming to generate his projection attacks, and his projection attacks doing like 3 hits each time, every 1.6 second, you know you definitely need this amount. But I'll definitely do the math to see for sure whether 28 damage instances is enough. Yeah, actually I forgot to show this while I was talking so much about it, right? Yeah. So I talk about the 28 instances, I talk about the CR. The CR at R5 is 8% and it's not worth the cost. Come on. Even Skyward Spine has like 8% at R1 and 16% at R5. And more importantly, what his signature weapon does is to give EM skilling on his normal attack and even more EM skilling onto his projection attacks. Okay? And technically he's picking his E. The rush attack damage. But I have to do the math, like I said, to ensure whether or not 28 instances is enough, or we interweave some dodges here and there between your 1.6 second interval. Maybe that will help manage the number of instances. But let's see how that goes. Okay. Now 12 seconds is no coincidence that his 3 mirror duration, the highest you can go is 12 seconds on the on-field DPS. Yeah. Okay. So this matches. So I'm done with the passive. I talk about signature, I talk about talents. Let's talk about constellations now. First constellation is C1. When a projection attack hits an opponent, E's cooldown is decreased by 1 second. This effect can be triggered once every 1 second. Now, since projection attacks have an interval of 1.6 seconds, while this has 1 second cooldown, effectively after 7 projection attacks, your E will be ready, and the E cooldown is going to be approximately even 11 seconds. But I can tell you C1, what C1 really does is to give you more uptime on 2 mirrors, not 3. Because it's not enough. Your E cooldown has to be reduced to 8 seconds for this to extend your 3 mirrors from 12 seconds to 16 seconds. Do I need to explain why? It's straightforward, right? You are only using your E and your CA after the first 4 seconds is done. So there's an 8-second gap. There's an 8-second duration. But that 8-second duration, your E is still not ready, your CA is still not ready, so that's why your on-field duration ends at 12 seconds, right? Now what happens here is that C1 only reduces your E to 11 seconds. If E was 8, it can be reduced to 8 seconds with this C1 effect. What happens is that when you use E on the 4th second mark or 5th second mark, by the time you arrive on the 12th or 13th second mark, you'll be able to extend the 3rd mirror again. But unfortunately, it's not. It's 11 seconds, not 8 seconds. So value of C1 is actually pretty bad if you ask me. I guess it helps in scenario where you just need a few more seconds of DPS while wanting to save your teammates E and kill for next floor of Cerebis. That's still there's value in that, I guess. But like I said, the value of C1 will be much better if the E cooldown can be reduced to 8 seconds, so that you can actually extend your 3 mirror state from 12 to 16 seconds. But beyond 12 seconds, most buffs will have ended too, so the whole cooldown reduction on his C1 is just awkward. But of course, it's depending on which character you're using, right? If you're using someone that is beyond the 12 seconds, like say 4 tenacity on Cookie, but even then, that's like 15 seconds. And if you take away the time required to set up your stuff, it's still 12 seconds. So on the whole, I'd say C1 is more like a QOL change. Because you also need to rotate your other characters in, right? Imagine doing 16 seconds of on field time. Sounds like someone familiar? Hint, the guy wears a mask. But C1 may be slightly better if you are using Nahida E, Raiden E, and Zhongli E. Why? Because all of their E's last long enough. Although Nahida's E ends when enemies are defeated, but I think you get what I'm trying to say here, right? Maybe in that scenario, C1 will have a bit more value. But right now, what I see for this C1 is it's really just making things more convenient for you in a scenario where you're not doing the full rotation, you just need a little bit more DPS. That type of scenario. So it's not great. C1 is not great. Like most likely for my math, C1 I'm gonna just take it as a 0% damage increase. Yep. Sorry, what's your name? C2 debate. C2 is a good one. Why? Because it generates whenever you generate a Childe mirror, you actually get 80 EM buff. Yeah, it's 80, not 40. It was changed to 80. Or rather, the Chinese was 80, the English was 40, so the English has been updated to 80. So EM increased by 80 for 8 seconds and max is 4 stats. But 4 stats? The mirrors are 3, right? So the effect can be triggered even when the maximum number of Childe mirrors has been reached. Yeah, now you see why, right? Okay, first off, let me just say this. This is a very good value constellation and it helps you hit your EM cap very easily, especially if you're not using Nahida. And even if you're using Nahida, more EM doesn't hurt. Okay? And it gives up to 320 EM. But as I've mentioned earlier, right, I don't think 80 EM is worth getting 8 seconds of 3 mirror versus 12 seconds of 3 mirror. 80 more EM during the 8 seconds. Unless you're confident 8 seconds is enough to clear whatever you're fighting. So to me, right, it's actually better to stack, at least if you don't have C6, it's better to target 3 stacks of this and only get the 4th stack when you're replenishing the first of the 3 mirrors that will expire at the 4th second mark. And because this buff lasts 8 seconds, right? So effectively what happens is that you get 240 EM for the first 4 seconds of your 12 seconds on-field DPS duration. You get 320 EM for the 5th to 8th second. And for the last 4 seconds, you get 160 EM. Why 160 EM? Because 160 EM comes from your 2 extensions, while your initial 240 EM is gone by this mark here. Okay. Now the alternative would be 320 EM for 8 seconds instead of this setup here. Instead of this staggered approach here, and it's 320. So it can be better. Like if it fits your rotation perfectly, or if your Ayato is stacked enough to clear everything in seconds, or you have C6. I'm not ruling this out. I'm just saying that if you are only at C2, generally speaking, it may be better to do this staggered EM bonus so that you do extra 4 seconds of your projection attack with 3 mirrors, which is 2 more procs. And I shouldn't talk about the spread. I'll talk about the spread later. Spreads. C3 very straightforward, right? I mean, it's going to increase its E talent level because projection attacks is main source of damage for on-field DPS, not for Quick Sorrow. Now, C4, how should I put it? Okay, let me just quickly describe it, right? For his C4, how it works is that when you use your Q, for each mirror that you consume, you increase EM of all other party members by 30 for 15 seconds. Doesn't increase Alhaithams. When you use your Q to generate mirrors, each mirror generated will grant Alhaitham a 10% damage Dendro damage bonus for 15 seconds. And this statement here is just telling you that it doesn't stack. Okay? Now, it's nice to see a Constellation confirming the playstyle I mentioned above for him, i.e. you can choose either Quick Sword or on-field DPS. If you choose to play him as a Quick Sword, ECAQ, this C4 effect allows him to grant 90 EM to all other party members for 15 seconds. So that's still pretty good, right? And this Quick Sword is what I'm talking about, right? You use E to get 2 mirrors, CA to get a 3rd mirror, and then use your Q. So that you do a 10 instance Q. 10 ticks Q. And when you do this, C4 effect will then allow you to grant 90 EM to your other party members, and obviously your other party members need to make good use of the 90 EM, right? That's how it works. If you choose to play him as an on-field DPS, starting with Q first to generate 3 mirrors, this C4 gives him 30% Dendro damage bonus for 15 seconds. So for on-field DPS, it gives himself 30% Dendro damage bonus. For a Quick Sword DPS build role, you give 90 EM to other party members. Now on a side note though, I think 90 EM is really a little pathetic compared to Tighnari's 120 EM and C4. I'm not mentioning Nahida because hers is only to the on-field character. Okay, theirs is to everyone in the team. So yeah, I have no idea why it's 90 EM. It should be 40 EM per mirror so that it hits 120 EM as well. And why am I using Tighnari as a comparison? Because Tighnari is 5-star. Right? You look at the other 4-star characters, it's like 60 EM, the EM buff that they give to the team. So yeah, I don't know why his is 90 EM. It's pathetic. It should be 120 EM. Come on, Koyoverse, make it standard. Right? Okay, let me just quickly double check something. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. Wow. Yeah, sorry about that. C5, usually his worst constellation, right? Typically the worst constellation, especially for on-field DPS, is quite useless. I mean, his multipliers are still good, you know, but in terms of like the overall rotation, it's not that great. Overall DPS contribution. Let's talk about his C6. If Alhaitham creates another Chiselite mirror when their numbers have already maxed out, then his crit rate and crit damage will increase by 10% and 70% respectively for 6 seconds. If you trigger it again, you increase by 6 seconds. So you basically extend the buff. So 70% crit damage is like Itto C6. But you get an additional 10% CI in return for not having the other most important effect of Itto C6. But this is very substantial. Because effectively what you do is you reduce your 3 mirror duration to 8 seconds. Why? Because you need a 4th, right? You need to create another mirror when you already have 3 mirrors. So what this means is that instead of extending it to 12 seconds, you have to do it 8 seconds. Okay? 8 seconds. In fact, you might have to change it around a little. Yeah, this is interesting. I never thought about the timing, but this, you may not get 8 seconds actually. At least for the 3 mirrors. Or at least for this effect. But nevertheless, I'll go more into more detail for that in Math Guide 2. But basically, you get hyper buff with 10 CR, 70 CD. You shorten your duration, but you get 10 CR and plus 10 CR plus 70 CD, and also having 320 EM throughout from the C2 effect instead of the staggered C2. So you can refer to the C2 sessions for details about the staggered C2 EM buff. Honestly, I think this is good because everything is gonna get slaughtered in those 8 seconds. 10 CR and 70 CD is huge. Like my Alhaitham right now, the 4 GD that I have for him is gonna be 70 CR with like 233 crit damage. So imagine adding a 10 CR and 70 crit damage, it's gonna be like 80 CR with 303 crit damage. He will hit really hard. Yeah, he will hit really hard. And this is crit rate and crit damage for Alhaitham, not for specific type of attack. It's for Alhaitham. Okay. Now, obviously, this doesn't work for his Q. This doesn't work for the Koinzell build. This is only for the on-field DPS. Which is why I keep saying that. I keep saying that there's 2 different options, but the on-field DPS is obviously the favored or the designed role for him. And honestly, this is good because I'm pretty sure everything gets slaughtered in those 8 seconds anyway, right? Assuming your Alhaitham isn't built wrongly. Now, that 4-second reduction matches perfectly for Nahida Series, by the way. Right? Because Nahida Series, you just need to do 6 attacks, be it an AOC. You can definitely do it in 4 seconds that you save or reduce from the CCC effect. It's matching perfectly, right? Yeah, but anyway, this is for C6 wheels. But yeah, this synergy is like glaringly obvious. Now, technically speaking, I'll probably cover in Math Guide 2, but it might be only 6 seconds for this buff. Either 6 seconds for this buff, or you get more than 6 seconds for this buff, but you have to sacrifice your 3 mirror. That means it's 3 mirror for 4 seconds and 2 mirror for the remaining 4 seconds? Something like that. Well, 10 CR and 70 crit damage is probably going to be better than the 3 and 2. No, not necessary, because once I bring spread in, it might change. So yeah, that's a lot more complicated. We'll look at that in Math Guide 2. Okay? Now let's talk about the Constellations Conclusion. As with most characters, C2 and C6 are the 2 strongest constellations. C1 is QL, in this case C1 is QL or situational. You can refer to C1 section for details. C3 should be decent but not great. Likewise for C4. I mean, it's not great because he has so many different type of damage sources, right? Although the projection attack is still the main. Now, C5 is probably the worst as usual, at least for the on-field DPS. Now, before doing the detailed math, I think C0R1 and C2R1 should be good targets. And maybe C3R1. But I need detailed math to be sure. Okay. Now, I just want to do one quick final note on his constellations. I see a lot of complaint about his constellations and that it's bad. You have to give up 3 mirror damage on his Q. I actually don't see it this way, because I see it as his Q offering you 2 options. You either do a quick sword roll or you do an on-field DPS roll. Even if you want to proc 2 projection attacks before using his Q, It's still a quick swap build because you still have to use his Q within 4 seconds of using his E. Otherwise, you simply can't get to consume 3 mirrors. Because it will naturally expire after 4 seconds. And you have already used your E and CA to generate mirrors. So you have no other ways to generate mirrors. That's why I say if you want to use his Q, then it's a quick swap build. Okay? It's quickly swapping him, do his E, do his CA, do his Q. That's it. Simple as that. Now, in the first place, even at C0, wanting to get 3 mirror effect on his Q also means that you can only play quick stop. Okay, so it's actually nothing to do with Constellations, because even at C0, this is the same thing. If you want to use 3 mirror effect on his Q, it has to be a quick sword roll. There is no way to use him as an on-field DPS and at the same time want his Q to have 3 mirror damage. It just doesn't work that way. Or rather, it can work that way, but you basically have no mirror projections happening. So why would you use him as an on-field DPS? You don't even have Dendro infusion once your Q is done. Because your Q, when you consume 3 mirrors, it doesn't generate any mirror. So yeah, I don't think he's an on-field DPS when he's only attacking for seconds. That's why I say it's a very, very distinct thing. It's a very clear-cut definition or design here, where he's mainly built for on-field as on-field DPS, but he has the option to become a quick sword based on your situation, combat situation. Okay. Now his constellations benefits his on-field DPS role more, but some of the cons still benefit the quick sword role. Like your C2 is still benefits, right? 240 EM, because the 240 EM goes to your A1 passive, A4 passive, sorry. And the A4 passive is the one that gives you EM skilling onto his Q. So 240 EM from C2 still helps. C4 helps with your quick sword roll because you will end up giving 90 EM to your teammates. Obviously, your teammates must make good use of the 90 EM. And then you have C5, which increases your Q talent damage. So you can't say that they don't benefit the quick sword roll. Now, personally, I actually like that he has such flexibility. But I don't know whether to say it's like a misunderstanding of how he works, because I feel like Alhaitham is getting misunderstood just like in story, where he's always like kinda under suspicion. But I thought it's a very cool design, a very neat design here that they're doing, where you actually have the character being able to go 2 ways based on the combat situation, not even based on building him. Technically speaking, I guess you can build him more towards the quick sword, go all full all out and more to optimize quick sword, but I don't recommend that. I definitely recommend the on-field DPS more. Plot twist, maybe Hoyoverse is doing this on purpose to his kid, right? Making it harder to truly understand how his kid works for some folk, so that it sticks to how his character is like in the main story or the Archon quest. Well, that's the Constellation Conclusion. Let's talk about the kit summary. So after going through all of that, how is Alhaitham? I'm going to start by reiterating this again. In order to use his 3 mirror Q, which is 10 instances of Q ticks, he has to be played as a quick sword roll. You can only do it via E, CA, or immediately Q, or you do a few NA and then Q. And your Alhaitham is going to be on cooldown for a long time. Okay, it's very, very long. And you can have to do it this way because the mirrors expire after the first 4 seconds. So you want to use 3 mirror Q, you can't use your Q later than 4 seconds from the point of casting your E in this case. So yeah, it's very tough. Now, next point to consider is the energy particle generation. His energy particle generation is actually from his projection attacks. Given the long E cooldown, I already expected this. And I'll share more about how his energy generation is like. But just knowing that it's from the projection attacks, you will know that doing quiz on him is really tough. It's going to be really tough on your EI and energy requirements. Right? Because you're barely on field. And on top of that, you're not getting energy from casting your E. You're getting energy from the projection attacks, which you will at least trigger once for a charge attack. And depending on whether you do a few more NAs after that. But it's very, very risky to do these few more NAs. If you're doing quick story, it might be better just to ECAQ. That's it. So with all of this in mind, I actually think that he's better played as an on-field DPS, utilizing his Q to generate 3 mirrors as the first action, and E and CA to maintain the 3 mirrors for longer than 4 seconds. But at the same time, he does have the added flexibility, as and when you need to do a higher damage Q, you can just go for it. Oh, and by the way, I think the occasional quick swap with higher Q damage would be more optimized with other characters that have lower on-field time, you know, like a C6 Nahida that can do the role of his can double as the role of being his support too. Like the synergy is just so obvious for that. Now that being said, even if you don't have C6 Nahida, I think it's fine to do the occasional 3 mirror kill if you're confident it's enough to clear the enemies, or you don't really care about the energy situation for the next rotation. Definitely doable. Now his constellations, like I've mentioned earlier in the Constellations conclusion, right? This is pretty much the same statement. While his constellation benefit favor his on-field DPS more, some of the cons still benefit your crystal rope, like C2, C4, C5. In fact, looking at his multipliers, I'm actually fairly confident that he will perform very well, because his multipliers are all very high. Even with standard ICD assumed for all his attacks. But here's the good news. His projection attacks actually have a 2-hit ICD rather than a 3-hit ICD. Which means that if you do via my method of doing 3 mirror for 12 seconds, you are rewarded with more spreads. And I'll talk more about that in the ICD, which is actually the next session. Okay, so this is the overall case summary. Let's talk about the ICD. So ICD for him, from what I can gather in terms of all the information that's available, normal attack and charge attack have standard ICD that's shared between the normal attack and charge attack. And this is typical for sword users, okay, for most sword users. Q has standard ICD as well, while E has 18 seconds or 11.2 seconds if you have C1. So it doesn't really matter, you can just treat it as no ICD for the E, at least the rush attack damage. Now the projection attacks are the interesting ones where the 2-hit ICD instead of 3-hit. It means that when you have 3 mirrors doing 3 hits with each projection attack, right? Even factoring the 1.6 second interval. Basically what this means is that you do 2 spreads in first wave or first projection attack. 1.6 seconds later you do 1 spread. Another 1.6 seconds later you're gonna do 2 spreads again. Because it's 3 hits, right? And it's a 3 hits on the projection attack and a 2-hit ICD rule. So it's gonna be 2 1 2 1 2 1. So you basically get a additional 0.5 spread if you really even it out. But nevertheless, it's a good thing for Alhaitham. Okay. Now energy generation is very straightforward. It's 1 particle every 1.5 seconds from projection attacks. Simple as that. And because the projection attack is 1.6 second interval, right? So basically you'll get 1 particle every time you trigger a projection attack. As simple as that. Now, in terms of Alhaitham given that he's meant to be an on-field DPS and he's a Dendro, right? So I'll build him in aggro spread comp. I mean, it's so straightforward, right? You definitely build him in aggro spread comp. Technically speaking, you can build him in a quick bloom comp, but quick bloom is very copium. Like you're assuming that you'll always be able to trigger the spread. It's a bit optimistic, let me put it that way. So that's why I don't really want to cover it unless there's a high demand for it. Okay. I'll share the details for the comp in the next math guide. I think it shouldn't be difficult to guess if you've seen my other aggro spec comp guides before. You know who are gonna be the typical characters, right? But I'll definitely talk about variants as well, especially the F2P variants when we talk about the comp in math guide too. Alright? Alright, let's talk about TLDR. I'm just glad that I didn't go 1 hour on this video. Although it's close to it now. Now, Alhaitham, since designed to be an on-field DPS with option for quick sword roll, with your 3 mirror kill to having 10 ticks of damage, the option to do that. But personally, I wouldn't really recommend the 3 mirror kill because it's not very sustainable in terms of rotation. So please see the key summary and Constellations Conclusion for the details. Okay. Now, generally speaking, even at C0, I believe using Q to set up the 3 mirrors and then your E and CA every 4 seconds, or E/CA every 4 seconds to generate another mirror, to maintain your 3 mirror state for 12 seconds is better. Now, for other scenarios where it's worth considering using the 3 mirror Q instead, it would be like if it's enough to clear your enemies, or you don't care about using Alhaitham with your next rotation, for example. That's definitely doable. Which means he's not going to be the only DPS, huh? Yeah. Or if you have a dual DPS setup, where the other DPS takes lesser on-field time, example Tighnari or C6 Nahida, who also doubles perfectly as support too, then you can't afford to do that, right? I mean, the first rotation you do it as a quick sword, then you can use Nahida, C6 Nahida to do the 6 normal attacks or charge attacks to proc the C6 effect. Or you can use Tighnari to do his combo Q, E, and the 3 charge attacks. And the all of the above that I've covered right so far is why I don't think his constellations are that bad. Because even at C0, you have to give out his on-field DPS for 3 mirror Q to begin with. There's nothing to do with the constellations. It's how he's designed. It's 2 different roles. Okay? This constellation may benefit the on-field DPS role more because that's the role that's sustainable across rotations. But you get the option to go quick sword if you want to. If you need that surge in damage, go for it. Right? If you're confident that it will just kill the boss, and you don't care about energy after the boss, you're gonna do some other things to get your energy back, then go for it. Go for it, man. And besides, although I say is favoring his on-field DPS role more, you still have C2, C4, C5 that benefits your quick sword role. Okay? Alhaitham video series was coming next. I'm glad that we finished covering Alhaitham. I hope I have been clear so far with regards to how to use his Q. And it's very straightforward, right? This here. But when you need a search, then you do the 3 mirror Q setup, which is like very simply ECAQ instead of starting with his Q first. Yup. Alright, so as per typically how I'll do a math guide series, we have finished the dictate kit analysis. We're going to do com next, then artifact comparison, weapon comparison, constellation refinement comparison. Alright. So I hope the video so far is helpful to you. If you like the content, remember my video and click subscribe for more. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.